Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I am your host, Will McFadden, joined by Tori McElhaney. Tori.
Will.
I've been in this podcast studio for what feels like ever. We were here bright and early this morning, or I was, and then, you and I chatted about the Matthew Judon.
Hold on. I just want to tell the people what the last 24 hours has been like for me. I know this podcast isn't about me, but I'm about to make it about me for 5 seconds. Last night, we get the Matthew Judon news breaking. Write that story, get that up, start the analysis.
You
all
like
good.
Pulled off the road, right?
I was in a parking lot outside of a brewery.
Yep.
Was in Lawrenceville was where I wrote that story. Woke up this morning. We recorded a podcast. I sent in scripts for Fox 5, the show that I do with Kelly Price called Rise Up Tonight. Check it out. Midnight, Thursday night, Fox 5 Atlanta. Wrote scripts. We get on a podcast, which you can check out on our Spotify and Apple podcast feed. It was audio only because we were literally running around like crazy people trying to dissect and analyze the Matthew Judon trade and him agreeing to terms and everything that was happening. Wrote a story about how he fits within this Falcons defense. Shot the show with Kelly. Drove out here. You and I then proceeded to chat about this Justin Simmons stuff for the next 2 hours, wrote a news story, have another story probably coming really soon about how he fits with Jessie Bates III in this Atlanta secondary. Probably at some point I'll come up with a column about what this 24 hours was like and why it literally feels like a night and day from where we were on Saturday night after that Miami preseason game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to frame it.
Thanks.
And Tori's 24 hours, I will read that column all day long. But the way that everybody felt, I think, after the Miami preseason game and coming off of the heels of what were 3 pretty big blows Braylon Trice, DeMarco Hellams in the aftermath of Rondale Moore. Mm-hmm. Like, those were 3 players. And it's interesting because I've started almost thinking in my mind, like, scholarships and walk-ons, because that's just easy for me to, like, as we're thinking about a 53-man roster cut down and, like, who do I feel really good about having spots and roles? It's like, those are your scholarship guys. And then we've got walk-ons trying to make the team.
Mm-hmm. Transfer portal guys.
Yeah,
Rondale Moore.
It's just, like, there's so many different ways you can label people now, but it's like Rondale Moore, DeMarco Hellams, and Braylon Trice were all scholarship guys.
Yeah.
Like, those were players that you were going to have step up and play big roles. And so kind of feeling like, okay, this season, there's still excitement because you have Kirk Cousins and, like, his presence has been real. And, like, the defensive line making strides, their presence has been real. But it was a little bit like, all right, so now is this going to be another big slog for the NFC South? And not to put the cart before the horse, it may still be. This is football. Anything can happen on Sundays. But, whew, man, it feels so much better sitting here talking about Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon ahead of the season.
So let's talk about Justin Simmons, because we've already talked ad nauseum about Matthew Judon. Like, we already know kind of the sack machine.
He's a
monster.
minotaur, if anybody has missed. He's just coming off the edge, the strongest man alive, I swear.
But now you bring in Justin Simmons to pair with Jessie Bates III. And you actually pulled up this stat, and while we're talking about Justin Simmons, and as we were getting everything together to talk about this signing, and it was so interesting. I had no idea. Since he joined the league in 2016, his 30 interceptions are the most by any player since that year.
Yep.
That is a banana stat.
Yep.
Especially when you add it to Jessie Bates' 20 career interceptions, 6 last year.
Mm-hmm. He's tied for 13th on the list.
Okay. And then you add on the fact that Jessie Bates was a top 80 player on the NFL Top 100. Justin Simmons was a top 60 player on the NFL Top 100. The way that people talk about them is it's very similar because of their instincts and the way that they carry themselves and how they see the play happening in front of them and their reaction to it. Mm-hmm. I would argue that this is and again, this is happening as we're talking about this. This news is breaking as we're talking about this. But I off the top of my head, I'm having a really hard time being like, how many other safety pairings in the league are better than these two?
Yeah, that's That's a great question. I mean, I think so. The Bills have always had really good with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, but now Jordan is down in Miami, although they've got a great one with Jordan and Xavier Howard. Actually, it's funny. Xavier Howard, let me pull back up that list. He is second since 2016 with 29 interceptions. So they've got a good one. If you like, the Eagles have, had really good secondaries, but you're right. Like
you would put the Falcons on a short list now for best.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
Yes.
For best safety pairings in the league.
Because I think that, so when they initially made the move to acquire Jessie Bates, I was like, even though he's in the AFC, I'd been very well acquainted with Jessie. Like he is somebody who I watched a lot of when he was coming out in the draft because the Falcons were kind of maybe looking at adding help to their secondary at the time. And he just seemed like such a cerebral and smart player coming out of Wake Forest. And Justin Simmons is the exact same way. Like
just with a little bit more height.
Yeah, he's just 6'2", 2 more inches on him.
Yeah.
But it's like he was drafted initially as kind of part of that Vic Fangio defense, which is very taxing mentally on a safety because of the way that they're going to roll their coverages afterwards, and what could look like a two high is now all of a sudden we got a robber and we've got a cloud corner and all this different stuff going on. Yeah. I'm just trying to impress everybody out there with 2 different phrases that I learned. But having both of those guys, like that is really smart, and that's intelligence that's going to be able to equal any quarterback in the NFL that is going to be facing them.
Yeah, and the fact, you have to kind of give credit where credit is due, that the front office, Terry Fontenot, Kyle Smith, Ryan Pace, that group, the work that they've done, not just in the last 24 hours when the news is actually breaking, but this has been a long time coming. And for these 2 players specifically, these 2 players are players that we were talking about in the summer months, about what contracts could look like. These are 2 players whose future in 2024 was a little bit of a question mark. There were a good number of teams that were really honing in on trying to get these guys on the roster. And the Falcons found a way to do that with, let's be honest, a couple of days ago, they had the least amount of cap space in the league. So they have been maneuvering the cap in order to make these signings happen or trades happen with Matthew Judon using a 3rd-round draft pick. That can't go unnoticed. It's reported that the Falcons took Chris Lindstrom's contract and restructured it to make room for these guys and to take on their salaries and everything like that. And I'll be honest too, reportedly, again, there is something to be said about these aren't, at this point in time, we're recording, on Thursday afternoon, these are not reported to be long-term deals.
No.
Which I find to be very, very interesting in the context of what these guys were looking for. I think that, to me, also speaks to the way the Falcons were able to sell these guys on what's happening here in Atlanta.
The whole kind of offseason, I've been trying to think about what are the different elements of his time out in LA that Raheem is bringing back here to Atlanta. And I think that this approach can qualify as one because 3-4 years ago, the Rams, everybody was talking about them giving up all their draft capital to acquire veteran players, star players on kind of these short-term contracts in a chance to go win now. And that did result in a Super Bowl for them.
It's exactly what we talked about this morning when we were when we were talking about Matthew Judon, and we're kind of making this point about how it is mimicking what the Rams did a couple of years ago.
And Raheem brought up Von Miller specifically during his press conference in kind of like, hey, that acquisition allowed us to get a game wrecker on the roster. Maybe the hope is that Judon can kind of turn into a similar player on the front end, but now on the back end, I think it's safe to say they've got a game wrecker as well. Like they've got 2 of them.
Right. This morning we talked about how the acquisition of Matthew Judon changes the way that you view the expectations of this pass rush. Inserting Justin Simmons into this secondary changes the level of expectations that I have for interceptions, PBUs. And the fact that we're talking about the 2 most fundamental parts of defensive disruption with these 2 acquisitions that happened within 24 hours of each other, I don't know if we've had a 24 hours quite like this I'm trying
to think.
Especially thinking about it, not in like a true free agency window, not in a first wave of free agency, but happening in a training camp preseason.
Yeah, definitely not in a training camp or a preseason.
This is kind of like unprecedented for this franchise.
But I kind of dig it, Tori.
dig it.
Like the fact that we've got football in 15 to 20 days, and it's like, oh, cool. Now we get to like open up some presents almost early. It's like when you get to like open your Christmas present like the day before Christmas, and your parents let you have just one.
You got two.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that is very just like, I think, invigorating for a fan base that, again, like the Kirk Cousins signing initially was really, I think, what everybody wanted to see.
Yeah.
But then you almost got the momentum stalled from that a little bit during the draft. And you and I have been very clear that, like, we understand the Penix pick.
Right.
We, I think in a lot of ways, agree with the Penix pick, but there is no doubt in my mind that the fan base, when that was the selection on night one, was kind of like a little bit wrong-footed.
Yeah.
And again, the momentum of the offseason hit a little bit of a patch right there. But this feels like it's brought it completely back. I was looking at social. So many people are like, we're so back, baby. Let's go. Like me booking my ticket to the Super Bowl parade. There's so much energy and excitement right now. And I think that mirrors the energy and excitement that we have felt kind of on the field really throughout training camp.
Right.
And that starts with Raheem. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.
Yeah, before any of these guys got in here, it was day one of Raheem's press conference, his introductory press conference. You felt that energy and you felt kind of that shift and almost like fun culture. Like they're going to go and get their work done, but they're going to have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
And I've thoroughly enjoyed watching this team act in that manner. And these two acquisitions that we're talking about here, I mean, I just can't help but think that if everything goes right, this defense is significantly better with those two in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think about too, your star power on this defense. It's not that often in the last few years have you kind of been able to say, maybe even outside of Grady Jarrett and AJ Terrell, like that there's some star power, some star punch in this defense. And now you look at it and it's at every single level. It's Grady Jarrett, it's AJ Terrell, it's Jessie Bates, it's Matthew Judon.
I mean, to us,
Justin
it's like
Simmons.
Caden Ellis and Troy Anderson.
I know,
but right.
But for like the league at large,
Yes.
think about it like from a national perspective.
Guys on that top 100 list,
Right.
or like on the short list to be on that top 100.
Yeah. I just think that there's something to be said about that now you have this kind of star power that kind of packs a little bit of a punch.
Yes.
That, I don't know, I think it should make you excited and it should make you expect more from this defense that I'm going to be completely honest, even going into the 2024 season, I already had high expectations for this defense, especially with Grady Jarrett coming back, with Jimmy Lake's new scheme, with kind of what we saw Jessie Bates do in 2023. There was a lot to be excited for. AJ Terrell kind of playing on this 5th-year deal.
Yep.
You don't know what's going to happen with him. Like, obviously, there's a lot that you need to think about. And if you're AJ, you're like, I want to get that bag too. So all of these things are happening simultaneously, which I think accumulates to me having big expectations for this defense. Adding these two guys specifically only heightens that for me.
Yeah. Because if there was a group that we felt most, probably like the highest floor, but also a decently high ceiling, was the linebackers, that inside linebacker group.
Yeah.
And so now you're addressing the group in front of them and the group behind them. And so really when you look at all three levels of Atlanta's defense, to your point, there are names now. There's names where when you looked offensively and you could be like, Go up and down the offensive line. You know the guys there. Go with the wide receivers, tight ends, skill position guys. You know them there. Now we've got Kirk. It's like the same thing on the defense where you look around and you're like, cool, Justin Simmons. Cool, there's Lorenzo Carter. Cool, there's Grady Jarrett. Cool, there's AJ Terrell. Like you just maybe feel a little bit better. And it's also a far cry from kind of where they have been over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and not to
no,
any disrespect to anybody who's come through here in the last few years. That was just
You and I raved for a second about Casey Hayward.
Casey Hayward.
Yeah, he got hurt. It's just like,
it's just kind of the nature of the thing. Right. I loved getting to know Jaron Harmon and Eric Harris.
And they were hugely influential, I think, on a lot of the young guys.
Even last year, Bud Dupree, Calais Campbell, those guys, Calais Campbell had his 100th sack here.
Yeah.
Like,
no slouches themselves.
There's nothing to be said bad about those guys who have come through here and been on these short-term deals and the impact that they made on some of these younger guys who have grown up within the last 4 years as well. It's just now you talk about Matthew Judon, you talk about, Justin Simmons along with, again, the names that I keep talking about, Jessie Bates. I go back to what Jessie Bates and Justin Simmons can do together. These are two guys who were voted to the Pro Bowl last year.
Yeah.
Together. Well, not together, but like opposite, different divisions.
It's crazy that when you look, though, at kind of like the list of where all the safeties and the defensive backs are ranking, like Jessie Bates is up there as well.
Yeah.
It's just like Justin Simmons is a little bit higher in each of those categories. So that's where when we already know that Jessie kind of like, I know he didn't, but it felt like he single-handedly like won the Falcons 2 games last year. Imagine just now if you have Justin Simmons also doing the same thing. And that's projecting, and that's not how everything is going to play out, but you feel so much better, again, about those two guys. And I saw Aaron Schatz, who formerly of Football Outsiders, now with FT and Fantasy, but they do all the DVOA. And he tweeted, if the Falcons are signing Justin Simmons, their mean defensive DVOA projection has gone from 9.9%, which is bad. The higher your DVOA is for defense, that's a little bit worse. So they had that projection of 9.9% as last among all defenses in DVOA projections for the season. With these two moves, they're projected to be 24th now at 2.9%. So that's an 8-spot swing from 2 players. And again, that's you and I are higher on this group than I think DVOA is, a lot of the other people, because we have seen it in practice. We've seen guys like Antonio Hamilton step up. We've seen Kevin King make some plays, and I don't think everybody is factoring that in. But even just these 2 moves, you can see how greatly that has swung just what the prognosticators are saying. Yeah, words are hard.
Man, this has been a crazy 24 hours.
So much fun.
Not even 24 hours. It's been less than 24 hours.
Yeah. At this point yesterday, you still weren't sitting in the parking lot outside of that brewery, were you?
No, not yet. I still had a few hours to go until I was doing that.
Oh, we were so young back then.
Oh, I feel like I've aged 10 years in the last 24 hours. Oh, man. But no, this has been a crazy day. And, I'm honestly just sitting here like watching tweets roll in and like seeing
people. It's easy to forget there's a preseason game in 2 days.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We do. We leave for Baltimore on Friday.
Tomorrow.
Literally tomorrow.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Time is a flat circle. So what do you say we go ahead and wrap up this one? It was Emergency Podcast. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more thoughts on both Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons once we hear from them, once we get a chance to see them out there on the defense. Last thing I'll add, though, is that both of these guys are clear fits for what Atlanta is trying to do defensively. I think some people could be like, all right, but again, the fact that the season's only a few weeks away, I'm counting as a good thing, but it could be looked at as, do you have enough time to get these guys ready, to get them acclimated with a new team, with a new group, a coaching staff? I kind of think they're going to come in and know exactly what they're going to be asked to do, how to plug in, and it's going to be solid.
The thing, some of the best advice, or not advice, one of my favorite things that Dean Pease ever told me, and if you've been listening to this podcast, you know how much I really enjoyed the time I got to spend covering Dean Pease and getting to know him.
Like peas and carrots.
Truly. 2 peas in a pod, if you would. But he said time and time again, it's like you don't fit the scheme to you don't fit the player to the scheme, you fit the scheme to the player. And when I look at what the insertion of Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons is, it's like the caliber of player that you're getting. You do what whatever you can to free them up to be the playmakers that you are paying them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I kind of sit. It's like, yeah, we're a few weeks away from the start of the season, but just get those two guys specifically to the point where they feel comfortable enough to just play freely.
Yeah.
Once you do that, they've shown, especially in the last 5 years, they can go make some plays.
Yeah. Well, you've shown that you can make some plays in front of the microphone.
Try my best.
I always appreciate your time, Tori. It was so much fun, honestly, going through today with you and with the whole team and seeing everybody operate up close. It was great. So please check out AtlantaFalcons.com for all of the news that has happened in the last 24 hours and will continue to happen because we're going to be breaking it all down. But that will do it for this special edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. Welcome to Atlanta, Justin Simmons. Welcome to Atlanta, Matthew Judon. Get ready for a great season, guys. This is going to be a lot of fun. So for Tori McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. We will see you guys later.